All right, I think it's about that time. Kristen, are you ready?
Yep, sure am.
Great. Okay, and we have the Torre Brothers with us this evening, and we just have a couple slides to go through before we start the program. And so welcome everyone. My name is Marcy Peterson. And again, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Just type right in where you're listening in from. And I want to let everyone know that 2020 was our 50th anniversary. So we're celebrating this year 50 plus one. Wheaton Arts is thrilled to celebrate its 50th anniversary as one of the most unusual and creative landmarks in the Northeast. Founded by glass magnate Frank H. Wheaton Jr. and the first building opened to the public in 1970. 50 years later, Wheaton Arts has become an international hub for artists exploring the limits of their creativity and a reception for the regional's cultural diversity. It has additionally earned regional, national, and international recognition for its unique collections and programs. And up next, we'll be visiting with Michael Esposito and Eduardo Betancourt on the beauty and diversity of traditional Venezuelan music. That Wheaton conversation will happen on February 18th. And on March 4th, Thurman Statham will join us and Skitch Manion for a freestyle event as he discusses his art creative process and answers questions from the audience. I'm going to go through just a few tech tips, but I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the evening. So please ask questions in the chat to me about technical questions. This is a webinar, so we won't see you, but you'll see the presenters. And you can ask questions in the question and answer window, the Q&A. Look for the Q&A button. Should you lose connection for any reason, please close all your windows and just go back to your original email and click on that link. You'll be able to join us, leave and join us at any time. This session is being recorded for your viewing pleasure at another time. And it will be, I want to assure you that it's only the host and the panelists that will be heard and recorded. And I wanted to point out that there are several ways to support Wheaton Arts and free programs like this that you're enjoying tonight. One is through memberships, donations, and the other, my favorite, is shopwheatonarts.org. If you'd like to discuss other ways to support Wheaton Arts, like sponsorships, please contact Rhody Barron, Director of Development, at the number here and also at her email. But I'll be putting links in the chat throughout the evening here and there. But you can also contact me at the end if you cannot download your chat file. You can let me know and I'll be happy to send all those links over to you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce this evening my coworker, Kristen Qualls, Director of Exhibitions and Collections at Wheaton Arts. Kristen is moderating this evening and the questions that you ask in the Q&A window. So don't be shy with your questions, but please do put them in the Q&A window. So Kristen, over to you now, and I'll be going off screen, but I will be with you the entire time.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcy. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. And thank you, everyone who is here tonight. Looks like we have a variety of people from New Jersey, but we also get across the country. And it looks like we got someone from Scotland, too. So I hope we're all doing okay. I know it's some winter weather here in New Jersey. But we have Einar and Hammocks de la Torre with us, and they're coming from Baja. So I think they have maybe nicer weather than some of us. but we're really excited to have them. They are from Mexico, but have spent their career straddling that border between Mexico and America. And so I think we'll see in their presentation of their work how they strike that balance, and the way all the places where they've been able to work and display their art, they learn about the local history and culture and really incorporate that into what they're doing. So I found it really inspiring to work with them, and I am so excited to let them share with you what they've been up to most recently.
Thank you, Marcy. That's a lovely introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share screen now.
Yes.
And here we go. I'll start that off. So my brother will talk a little bit more about our background, and then we're launching. Thanks everybody for coming.
Hi everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be here in a virtual conversation with everybody. I'm the one on the left. My brother is the one on the right. Our heads were attached to the baby Jesuses for fun. In the back, you'll see our studio in Baja California, which is the farthest northwest corner of the country, Mexico, that is. And we live on both sides of the border. We cross the border a lot. We're originally from Guadalajara, Mexico, and we went to art school in Long Beach State University.
Live and work on both sides of the border. Now we have a place in San Diego as well. So for us, going to one place to another is about an hour and a half drive. And the border is open if you have dual citizenship, which we both do, of course. Our talk is named Trifecta because we want to talk about the sort of a three-pronged way that we see our career in the arts. One of them is gallery work, object-based, whether sculptures or two-dimensional work, mostly sculptures. Second is installation art, which goes usually is commissioned by a museum. That's more like the art that you're getting into the environment. And the art becomes part of the place, whether it's site-specific or not. It's a larger scale and incorporates the viewer into the artwork. We love working in this realm. And then lastly, we are also working quite a bit in public art, meaning that we do commissions for cities through the RFQ process. So this is our studio from the outside, and this is from our studio from the inside. We have some work in progress on the right, mixed media sculptures, some with glass, not necessarily everything. And that triangle that you see there is a water jet cut aluminum for a project that we're doing for the Metro light rail station in Los Angeles.
A couple of older pieces from the mid-90s. The left is called Baja Cali, about 6 feet high. And on the right is Cuauhtemoc, who was the last emperor of the Aztecs. And they burnt his feet in order to divulge the treasure. Those pieces are kind of in a rough style that's usually termed rascuache, which is make do with whatever you have. And we don't exactly work in this style anymore, but it is our background.
And a couple of other examples. These are, of course, more recent. The last two pieces are from the 90s to date ourselves a little bit. These pieces are maybe 3, 4 years old. They're both more or less 2 feet tall. The one on the left, maybe the one on the right, 30 inches tall. The top parts are blown glass, meaning the figure on the left and the skull on the right. The bottom part of the left is the piece is called Bible Belt. That's what his B on his belt it means. And there's a cast resin base at the bottom, the pink piece. My brother's gotten very good at casting resin, and it's wonderful that you can put inclusions and colors, and certainly a much lower temperature than glass. The piece on the right, Mictlantecutli, is got the base of it is a terracotta pot that we made when we were at residency at Pottery Northwest in Seattle.
And this is a rather large piece that we made in a residence at the Glass Museum in Tacoma, where they have an awesome team to work with. led by Ben Cobb. It's made in a raticello for those class people that are into the Italian techniques.
To give a little bit of scale, that's a car, small car's tire rim. So you get a little bit of a scale. This piece is quite large. It's almost 3 feet tall altogether. So it's quite a large glass sculpture on top of that rim. And the one on the right is also the glass at the top, and again, a terracotta part, the second part at the bottom. The piece on the left is Lord of the Flies. So the fly itself, the little creature there, is blown glass, but the background is, we don't really love to use the term found object because we really go out of our way to look for certain things. We don't necessarily stumble upon things. We're very choosy with what the material culture we're using. Material culture being the anthropological term for the objects that sort of define the people and the time frame. So this is probably a base for some product that we ran across, and we bought a couple of them. They were probably trying to sell something there, and they're very much in the disco lights that would be moving around. Now the little figures at the bottom are quinceañeras, or the sort of a debutante, sweet 16, a very big tradition in Latin America. And the butterfly is cast resin from our studio, to give you an idea of all of the things it takes to make that piece.
The one on the right, El Astronauta, is holding binoculars that are actually Avon bottles, to get back on the subject of objects and culture.
If I can interrupt, I just want to note that I got to promote my South Jersey glass here. Those Avon bottles were probably made in Millville, as the Wheaton Glass Company had that Avon
Right on.
contract. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and we've used quite a bit of them. We did a project where we acquired a lot of them and used them for public art in a library in San Diego.
But it is hazardous, because if you open them, you're gonna stink up the place, man.
Oh my goodness.
oh, I welcome to our collections area. Yes, I know.
Very cool. Couple more figures. The luchador on the left is just recently taken a heart out. That little obsidian, that's actually a chunk of obsidian knife, is what the Aztecs would use to extricate these human hearts. So we're kind of playing with that a little bit in that how the lucha libre and bringing it back to the time of the Aztecs.
So a lot of the work plays with the idea of human sacrifice, which is obvious in the context of the Aztec world, but maybe it's less obvious in the modern world, where we pretty much exploit the poor countries for sake.
And the rainforests and other things, just so we can have our, and we're not judging, because we ourselves have our cell phones and we consume, but we do talk a little bit about some of the idiosyncrasies of modern existence.
Last year, we made this piece in order to kind of symbolize the beginning of the year, like the way they used to start the year, with a baby taking the baton from an old year ending.
Band of the last year.
And since this last year was such a crazy year, we decided that it needed to be an absolutely insane baby.
So it's kind of like an Aztec emperor being born, and he's kind of a warrior, telling us how the 2020 was gonna be an interesting year, already pre-tattooed. He's sitting on a bed of roses, and that's a cast resin base with roses inside. Those blue diamond bedposts are polished glass diamonds, and with the blown glass head of the baby we made as well. But the baby is probably part of pharmaceuticals for industries trying to sell medicine for babies. We, of course, when we found this this object, we severed the head off because we wanted to replace it with one of our own, and then turned into this piece called exclamation point 2020 exclamation. It's very much about last year.
Here we're working in Pilchuck a few years ago.
We've probably been to taught at Pilchuck maybe 5-6 times. We were going to teach last year, but of course everything got delayed. We won't be going to Pilchuck this year. We will be teaching in Penland in
yeah.
session 3. I think the description is open if anybody's interested. It'll be Glass and Mixed Media, and we will be back in Pilchuck next year.
It's on the left side piece that we made that one in Holland, didn't we?
In the National Museum.
The curator's eye. So we are holding the curator's eye hostage, which is what you have to do as an artist.
And keep it for a little while. The piece on the right is a series of little animal deities. They're kind of animal spirits that we've been making. Tonali in the tradition of the central Mexico is your animal spirit. This one is on the right is called the recurring dream, sort of beckoning back to childhood and the odd images and symbolism that dreams can have. In this case, the chain is invested in the cast resin base, but it comes out of it to attach itself. So there's both a lead to pull the pull toy, but it's also stuck. And we're speaking about how our dreams can have all of these very hard to read and understand symbolism that is quite obtuse sometimes and hidden.
Two more anime creatures, Tonali creatures. The one in the left is an homage to Prince, again on a resin base. Both of them are on a resin base.
We made the Prince piece while we were in residency at River Falls, and we also went to Fosse in Minnesota, and that was when Prince had just died. So we had to do an homage. So this is Prince, animal spirit for Prince to lead him on his journey.
The piece on the left is a rather large bottle. We started a series of drunk bottles in Belgium because we realized that that part of the world got through the Black Death by drinking a lot of beer and avoiding water. So we wanted to make a little bit of homage to that.
And on the right is another one of the little animal spirits. This is a Scorpio, light on her toes, ballerina Scorpio with a mighty sting. We have her sort of being displayed like on a pin, like sort of
like a specimen,
like an insect collector specimen. Again, resin, cast resin base with Jesus Christs and jet fighters, and at the very bottom being held up by glass polished diamonds.
These are part of a series that we call sketches. They don't involve almost any glass. I don't think they have any glass. They have resin castings and objects that we have purchased and found, and they are put together with different adhesives and coated with a very thick bar top epoxy. And it's been good for us to make this series because it accesses a different level of collector that cannot afford a more expensive, large
Glass piece.
Heavy by the kilo piece.
So this, a few years ago, to be precise, in 2009, so it'll be what, 11, 12 years, we ran into lenticular technology. As you might be able to tell, we're not exactly minimalists, probably maximalists describes us better. So when we found this technology that can have so much information in the substrate, and then we could still build upon it, well, there it is. I will explain the lenticular in a minute, but in this particular piece that's at the part of the Lowe Museum in Miami, their collection, has a blown glass figure in front, and he is showing it's called botanica, showing the botanicals. But he's of course wearing has sort of a beret that's a peyote button, and mushrooms, magic mushrooms are coming from his head. The background is, the lenticular background is based on an image we took at the Museum of Natural History in New York City. It's a wonderful museum, and with other added imagery. So here we are working on a piece that includes lenticular, and there's a blown glass piece on it. And then if you take a look to the right, I will start a very short, quick video to show what lenticulars do. They can have up to two images that can move as you move sideways. And I'll explain more about it, but you can see it experientially this way. So pay attention to the slide on the right.
in addition to the double image, it has a wonderful 3D effect. Even a smaller piece like that can give you 30 centimeters of perceived depth.
So lenticular, to talk about it in more precise terms, it doesn't photograph well. That's why I showed a video right there. Here's the lenticular when we're working on it in our studio. It's fuzzy because we have we are stereo vision as humans, and cameras are monovision. So the video shows the movement and the depth well, but the still shot will always look a little fuzzy. That's because it's a flat image printed, but when there's a lens on top of it, a 1/4 inch acrylic lens with lines in it. Those lines act like little prisms that allow you to see one image, and as you move sideways, you will see the other one. It's a parallax blocker, means those parallel lines are blocking one image, and then as you move, showing you the other one. There's that piece once we finished it with, it's a water jet cut aluminum frame with resin castings on it. And as you see, the lenticular print is still a little fuzzy because of the mono shot of the camera. Here's a larger one. This is probably 3 by 5 feet, just the lenticular. And I'll show you the still images so you get an idea of what the images look like when you're just staring at it in person. Here's a detail of the construction of the when we were pouring the resin pieces onto the aluminum water jet cut frame, and the wonderful pattern it projects onto the wall once it's hung on the wall. So this is one image of the lenticular, Miss Mido, and here's the other. So as you're moving sideways, you'll go from this image and slowly would turn into that image, and then back again. This one in particular, the story behind this one is that we made it for an exhibition that unites artists with scientists from world famous Salk Institute in San Diego, and we were paired with scientists that specializes in mitochondrial science, and he told us about how Dr. Shadell, how the mitochondria is really important for all life forms. Of course, it's the engine of the cell. We all may remember this from biology class. But what they're finding out now is that perhaps as we age and cells deteriorate, that when the mitochondria is outside of the cell, it may wreak havoc and have a lot to do with our deterioration that aging is.
Another lenticular print. You're also going to show the flip on this one? Or?
Yeah. So here it is, the lenticular just as a photo. And this is one image. And there's the other. So that's what you would see as you walk sideways in front of it. And I have another example of that in video. But this is the full resolution that you would see if you were in person. So they are a lot sharper than you can possibly capture on a camera.
So all the lenticulars are like a digital collage of different imagery that we harvest from the internet or from our photographic archives that we have of pictures we've taken, and or other stuff that we find. So in a way, they work like our mixed media work because all the items are there perceived three-dimensionally.
So the image on the left is the finished work. It's a very large one. That's about 7 feet by 5.5 wide, 7 feet tall. On the right is it's a video of it that will show how it shifts from one image to the other. This one shifts almost entirely. The only thing the two images have in common are the eyes in the middle. And you can kind of see a little of the depth effect that it has. It's tremendous. Some of these pieces can have 20 inches of perceived depth, even though it technically is a flat image. It's just the lens fools you into perceiving depth. So here are those two images. This is the same piece. So technically, if you want to go there, this image is cut into lines, and half of the information is taken out of each one, and then they're interlaced. Put the lens on top of that, and that lens is also using the computer. All the layers of the Photoshop are warped in virtual space so that it looks like there's depth and there's images appear behind other things. So all of that stuff is within lenticular. You may see why we fell in love with this technology.
This starts our installation work. This one's called titled Soybeaner. It's about 10 feet tall with a photo mural in the background, and it's basically about how culture is being redefined by cheap items from China, from dollar stores. In this case, like the Virgin of Guadalupe being shut out from the center is made in China cheaply, but the colors are not quite right. So slowly they are changing our perception of our own cultural implements.
A couple of large sentries done in the Tula kind of fashion, from Tula in Mexico, north of Mexico City. They're a part of ruins now from, I believe it would be the Toltec culture. To date, these pieces that were done and then probably in 1999 or so, those TVs are all CRT TVs, and they are video cassettes there. Imagine that. Old video cassette players. So we're going to have to refurbish these pieces because they're part of a show that we have coming up later this year. That's kind of a retrospective. But again, so all of the objects in one are objects from north of the border, and the other ones are south of the border. So each one of them sort of represents a century and a passageway, because of course the Aztecs had trading routes that went all the way up into what is now Utah. And in terms of exchange with other indigenous cultures. So this was when there were no borders.
And this is an Olmec head morphed with a Polo lander, the lunar lander. It's a pretty large piece. It's about 12 feet high. We don't have a slide of the background, but the last slide of the background really, the back of this piece really looks like the lunar lander. It realized in glass boxes, sort of thermostatum style.
So to give you an idea of scale, the astronaut is human in size. It is actually the takeoff on the Aztec goddess Coatlicue, which is the mother goddess, mother creation. It's much like Kali is in the Hindu pantheon. So also those are car tires on the floor to sort of symbolize the sort of craters on the moon. This piece is called Colonial Atmosphere. And it's an Olmec head as a capsule. And here again, we use the Olmec head in a different way.
It's a resin casting with hair, human hair, making the curlicues on the face. The eyes is a mouth seen through the hole of a piece of white paper, where a poet friend of ours, Quincy Troop, did a special piece for sculpture. And the premise of our sculpture is that why couldn't the Africans have been in America first? Because the Olmec heads seemingly have African features.
So we named this piece Maybe, and he did a spoken word piece, Quincy Troop. On top of this was our first use of the butterfly crucifix we've used in many different installations around. The Olmec face is also cast with human hair in resin, so there's this sort of wonderful allegory on the skin of the face.
We had an exhibition in MACLA in San Jose. What is it now?
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
And halfway through the exhibition, where it was nicely funded by an NEA grant, we bumped into lenticular technology, and we changed our proposal, or rather suddenly to include lenticular printing. So this is our first lenticular print, which is a triptych in which we collaborate with Hans Memling with his famous Last Judgment triptych. We applied it to the conquest of Mexico.
So we do really enjoy collaborating with artists that are no more. It's a lot easier to get approval because they
never say no.
They never say no. So again, the butterfly crucifix here, we have a show touring in Europe that started in Lommel in northern Belgium. It's a glass museum. It's wonderful. They have a glass tower there, and for that glass tower, we made 300 of these butterfly crucifixes. And I'm going to press play. I want you to look at the eyes. They wink at you. And this is like a 5-story tower with twin spiral staircases going up. And we did installations all over the museum. This is the bottom of the tower to give you an idea of the scale. And that's where we had the rest of the exhibition. We made almost all of the work in this exhibition at that museum, except for that wheel that's in the back, that has the calendar kinetic piece that's back there. We made that one for the city of Lille, Toulouse, for an arts and music festival called Rio Loco in 2011 version.
And most of these pieces then left to be exhibited in Sunderland, in northern England. They have a glass museum there and a glass program that's really quite complete with incredible equipment.
So it's the National Glass Center of England, and here we used murals as well. There's that mural was the one we turned into a lenticular later, and in this museum we also made another lenticular. This one is an image of the fence dividing Mexico and the United States going into the Pacific Ocean. So the photos taken from Tijuana, and in the horizon you can see San Diego. We also have populated it with another artist we collaborate with often is Hieronymus Bosch, one of our favorites. And here we have basically the Garden of the Lights being depicted as a border crossing and the complications thereof. The angel that's up above is kind of an INS or border patrol, and there's a drone flying. So we like to play with this anachronistically with images and to talk about issues of migration and identity.
And this is the big wheel that we made in Toulouse. Now we also put it in Sunderland, in our exhibition in Sunderland.
A very different space. It's a wonderful space to exhibit because they have a huge atrium there with light, lots of light. So it was a good display for that. The show then afterwards went to the National Glass Museum in Holland, in Leerdam. And here we made another photo mural. We depicted ourselves in it as well as the curator. And several of these persons depicted in the mural have our faces on them. Sort of to make fun of ourselves as well. So we don't just make fun of the curator. And there is glass pieces, like in the middle at the top is a glass piece, and there's some cast resin pieces stuck to the wall. We also used the wallpaper on the ground. It lasted quite well for the duration of the exhibition on the left slide. And on the right slide is another large photo mural, again, with my brother and I's faces depicted as part of this very, very famous Flemish painting.
So this photo mural, we produced it relatively cheaply in Tijuana, Mexico, and then we carried it off to Europe. It really is the simplest, cheapest way to affect an environment in terms of installation art. It is quite effective for the money.
And again, that one has blown glass pieces on top, that little heart and the jug at the bottom. And those little creatures you see crawling all over are squirrels that are squirrel mannequins for taxidermists, that we, instead of coating them with squirrel fur, we put just lace on them.
And then the following year, we had a large exhibition in Abeltorf, Denmark, near when Aarhus was declared the cultural center of the
cultural capital for 2017.
And the museums there decided to do the 7 deadly sins because there were 7 museums, and by pure chance, or so they say, we got the sloth.
So the museum director told us that by pure chance they had to invite, wanted to invite Mexicans to come to Denmark to talk about being lazy. So of course we thought, well, we want to put some hammocks across the gallery, draw something out and crumple it up and sort of be lazy. But they didn't go for our conceptual work. So we had to bust out some work. We made, they commissioned some large scale lenticulars that went on the right wall. That's framed in pink. It's like 4 by 6 feet, which is rather large for a lenticular panel. And the wings up above in those butterflies are also lenticular. They're glass figures with lenticular wings that change from cathedral windows into soft horn images.
So when we were assigned the sloth,
I just
we complained.
quick question about the butterflies. This is the second time we've seen the butterfly sort of symbolism. Is this related to the migration of the monarch butterflies that go back and forth between America and down to Mexico?
Not exactly. It's a convenient symbol for transformation.
Yeah, for metamorphosis. Yeah. But we do address issues of migration a lot in our work, because our work is very much informed by growing up part of our childhood in Mexico and the later part in the U.S. and then going back to Mexico again, and it does inform our work very much. But in this case, we were talking about very much about the idea of transformation, and of course, there's the Christian idea of transformation with Jesus ascending to heaven, and of course our own metaphoric transformations as we change and become hopefully wiser as we age.
I just wanted to say quickly about the concept of sloth is that we bitched about getting sloth at first, but of course it turns out that we have a ton of things to say about sloth being Mexicans. But the thing that we really gravitated to is how a sloth cannot be our savior. In a sense, we expect way too much from our planet, and if we all slow down, be a little lazier, and just stop and think and not be less active, we will consume less.
So here, there's another angle from above. Again, some of the pieces that I've made that were in some of their shows. And as we've made, this exhibition has gone over the years to different museums, we usually make new work in that place. Like the piece on the left was made in Belgium, and the one further down was made in Holland, and so on. So here in Denmark, we also made work in their little shop, and a few pieces came out. So now when we're exhibiting, we're actually putting with the title of the work, that with the place it was made as part of the tour that keeps growing in terms of glass spaces in Europe. And so down there, you could see at the bottom of the slide, you see a lenticular, which is here depicted on the left with this wallpaper. The lenticular is the framed golden panel in the middle. And when we send when the finished artwork is sent to print, they send us proofs of how it's turning out. And the one on the right, which is that one, you can see what they send us. A slightly low res, but it shows the movement that will happen as you walk by. It's a ton of information, especially on large panels and like this. So this lenticular, but without the frame, is like 4 feet wide by 6 feet tall. So in 2017, also, we were invited to do a show, to be part of an exhibition in Leerdam again, but in a Kunstfort, in a fort art museum. And here the premise of the exhibition was inviting artists and designers to work with a team of artists, be it from 3 different places, from the Dutch artists, craftsmen, the Czech ones, and Italian ones. And then the artists would work with them. And then the show was going to be at the fort. So we had 2 rooms in this fort. We worked with the Dutch glass blowers from the Royal Crystal Factory in Leerdam. So these pieces are made out of lead crystal, rather large bottles.
And lead crystal is difficult to work with and rather heavy. It was a bit of a learning curve for us. But it was interesting. At some point in the Royal Factory, we were working with people talking Turkish, they were talking Dutch, the Romanian brothers, German too, and Spanish. So it was it was confusing at times.
Little Tower of Babel going on. So the other room that they gave us in this Kunst fort was, we made a sort of a decadent dinner setting with lots of.
We decided to get a big table just to give us an excuse to show a sort of decadence to play with.
And then the exhibition, we took it to the Fraunau Museum in 2018 in Bavaria. The people may know Fraunau from the wonderful academy Bildwerk, which we've taught at a couple times. So here we made a large mural, photo mural, sort of having an explosion of images from the revolution. And up on the left is papel picado, which is the little banners of paper up at the top. And in the middle of that, there's a glass piece we made at the Eich factory in Bavaria. So we really try to sort of be affected by where we're going in some measure. And here's another installation we made for that exhibition. Starting with the show in Holland, we decided to make a table that we called our atelier, our little workshop. In this case, in this piece, it's in that little cube in the middle, where we put pieces we didn't use, maybe some of our adhesives, a couple of bottles of beer, or maybe mezcal that we brought from Mexico that we used while we were making our artwork, so that to demystify a little bit the process of making art. Or maybe it mystifies it. I don't really know. We try to demystify it. It's been really popular because there is, I guess, a little bit of a hunger to understand better art and how it's made. So we've been adding it in a couple of the shows lately and making it a sort of a feature of the remnants of making art.
I think part of it too is that as Mexicans going to these very orderly Northern European countries, it's kind of a pleasure to be paid to make such a good mess. That comes so natural to us. So the following year, we were invited to participate in an exhibition in Lille, France. That they were having a big festival, and they had the theme of El Dorado. So we ran with that, and in this case, we redid the big table idea to show the decadence in terms of greed.
And actually, this was this show at Lille for part of Lille 3000, a big festival they have in Lille, France, northern France, every 3 or 4 years. Was named El Dorado, and it was at the same time as the Fraunau show, where they were happening, not the same opening, but the same dates. So we brought the work from that we did in Leerdam, and we also exhibited in this show. So technically there were 2 separate shows at the same time. Here you have the photo mural of the border scene again on the left side, but it's been changed a little bit to apply to this idea that we had for El Dorado. And the rest of the show had the pieces we made in Leerdam for the Kunstfort in cases. We always marvel at when you put work in cases, it looks like you can add value to them and charge more. It becomes so precious.
And the following year,
2019,
we were invited to put an exhibition in Wrocław, in Poland, in the SICK Gallery. And here we had several things. It was kind of an ambitious exhibition because we had several rooms to work with. And we decided to run with the idea of being Central Europe, how it has been run over by all sorts of wars and celebration of wars. So Einar put this Photoshop together that you see in the back, which is this vortex following on itself.
And they're all sort of dramatic paintings of Poland and revolution and conquest and all of these things. And they're all swirling to the middle, which is this little creature that we made in Bavaria that we decided to be a sort of Wodina, which is the sort of a frog deity that comes out of the lakes in the pagan Slavic tradition. And we wanted to talk about the Northern Crusades, because when the Crusades failed in the South, in what is now Turkey and
Jerusalem, yeah,
the whole when a lot of these warriors decided to go north and battle with the pagans. Not many people we hadn't heard of the story. The northern Crusades, they were basically taking the pagans out of the forest and forcing them to live in villages and of course become Christian. And we're now in a sort of thinking that this new neo-paganism is kind of like back to the nature. We had a show in the Copeland del Rio Gallery last fall that we named Neopaganismo. And it's sort of bringing the idea that this Vorianov, or trying to bring us back to the forest, is not unlike Greta Thunberg, telling us to consume less, and much like a Lorax, taking care of Mother Nature. That's shooting the exhibition in the other direction. The pieces in the Bresla.
I still like it better without the glass cases.
Yeah. And down below, there was other rooms, and we brought that installation of that decadent table and made a new version there. There we could control the lighting, so we got very dramatic lighting on it, really focusing on the table without the wallpaper.
And here starts our third prong of the theme of the talk, which is trifecta. And in this case, is our work in public art. We have completed 10 major public art projects, and the public art medium has surprised us in how we have kind of perversely enjoyed its problematics. But nonetheless, it's as an artist, it's important to say that it is just not the freest medium for self-expression. You have to go to committees, and you have all sorts of technical limitations. And of course, people are always telling us, you can't put your religious and sexual stuff on it. Well, it's just kind of obvious that we can, of course, but
we tried to anyway.
We tried to sneak some stuff.
So I think it came natural for us because we grew up with, our dad's an architect, so we grew up with blueprints back when they were blue prints on our, in our household, and visiting the work sites where our dad was constructing a home, or in a if he was constructing a factory, and growing up with that really, exposed us to the fact that that it's a teamwork thing. That I think also addresses the fact that we work together, which we often get asked, how do we work together? And I think that I might as well talk about that as well. I think that we were in the 90s working separately, early 90s, and it probably started from glass blowing, because glass blowing is kind of a team sport. It's very hard to do things on your own. It's been miserable, I think. And then we decided, when we were doing our studio in cold, our work in our studio, that once in a while, one of us would get stuck with our own piece, and would say, hey, why don't you go ahead and do something? And we quickly learned that you cannot collaborate with the parking brake on, meaning you cannot say, yeah, do whatever you want, just don't mess it up. Because part of creativity is the potentially messing it up. You need to really go with your feeling and let it happen. And we, of course, learn to trust, because collaboration is about trust.
The piece pictured is a robot 18 feet tall or so. It's located in a very old Mexican American community of Barrio Logan in San Diego. Here we wanted to play with the idea of making a kind of a 1960s toy robot mixed with a hand-carved stone, which is totally absurd. But in the stone, we were able to put in some pre-Columbian motifs mixed with contemporary motifs.
So those Mayan images are like they're Mayans maybe going on a skateboard or talking on a cell phone, and sort of modernized. Also trying to access the youth a little bit with the playfulness. This is a 10-foot mandala made from lenticular. It's very, very big, and it has, when the lenticulars get larger scale, the perception of depth really grows. Again, this sometimes is up to virtually 2 feet that you feel like you can move in there. Most of it behind the substrate, but a little bit floats in the air in front, so you can almost put your hand through it.
The picture makes it look like it's bubbling out, but it's actually flat.
So this is what we got as a proof from the printers, and you can see how the objects are sort of floating around, and that's the effect that happens when you walk by.
For the same project in Downey for the hospital, we made one for the waiting room, 5 by 4 feet, sort of like an aquarium. It's got the lenticular print in the background with a number of long glass pieces in the front. So it's playing with depth and space with both of them.
And those blown glass pieces are some of the first pieces that we made in our own shop. We usually, most of the glass we've made in other shops, whether we rent time or are invited artists. We never really just wanted to have our own shop. But we were lucky enough to acquire one of the little dragons from Mobile Glass Works, and once in a while we light that up. And so this was some of our pretty much our first run with that, and wonderful product they make. It's so easy to just light up and use it for a few days.
And in the same project, the same hospital, we did our largest lenticular. This is it's about 22 feet high. And it's interesting because when you put lenticular in architecture, you actually create this space that is not really there, because the 3D effect is quite effective. So you are affecting the perception of architecture. And so in terms of public art, it's pretty exciting.
So you'll see right now on the image on the left, I'm going to click it so you see the movement. So I want you to look at the left image. And of course, there's a human scale in the back. You can see the image moving from one to the other there. And the one on the right is the proof we had from those panels. Now, mind you, those panels are the equivalent of 5 sheets of plywood stacked, because they're 4x8 sheets. You can kind of see the lines on the image on the left and on the right. And here is the proof that they sent us, the printers on the right. That's the movement on the proof. It goes from one image and then to the other. The tree of life again.
And for the same hospital, God, we gave them several pieces. It was we did the largest monumental piece we have ever made. Over 20 feet high, tree of life morphed with the thorax of a human. There you can see the vertebrates there and the nerves coming from the vertebrates. It's basically to celebrate the work that they do in the hospital with spinal injury.
That's a little bit of an idea of scale. So it's fairly large piece.
So stuff that looks like clay is actually carved stone, and the flowers are ceramics.
And the stone, for those of you who might be asking, is cantera. It's basically the same stone that all of colonial Mexican buildings are made of. And there's many colors, from fairly dark all the way to very light gray, almost on the whiter side. And real quickly, so the way we would work on this is we would make a mold, an original comics made in the original in clay, took a mold of it, and then took a couple of casts in plaster to give to the carvers. The carvers will then cut it up into little pieces and then reproduce a piece in scale. So they would take all the measurements and basically, and then the jigsaw puzzle came together. And of course, this whole gigantic stone sculpture has steel inside of it, welded steel, to make sure that it's it's structurally sound.
And this is the last project we have completed. This is in San Isidro, a few miles from the border with Tijuana. It's a public library, brand new public library. So we did these large panels that sort of mimic the papel cortado, which is the paper cuttings that's used in festivities in Mexico.
And it's offset. This is steel. The steel water jet cut steel is offset about 1 foot from the building. So the shadows from the sun in the back create a wonderful reverberation of the pattern. Here you can see that. So this one is about 14 feet tall by 22 wide, and this one's 14 by 14.
And for the same project, we also did this gate inside the entrance of the lobby of the library with columns with backlit lenticular prints and a carved stone top.
So each one of those panels has a lenticular that shifts from a color image of some libraries and other images from all over the world, and a lot from California as well. As you can see on the top left is the Welcome to California on the fence on the border. And then that image shifts into these Piranesi type engravings that talk about old academia and learning. So you will see the first one, the one on the right, shows the depth you see when you move by it. and you can see the depth works because the images move and hide something behind them, and that's very effective to fool your eyes into believing that there is that depth in the piece. Again, it's a flat print, believe it or not. That same print has, as you keep moving, will shift and become this print on second from the right, the Piranesi prints, with the leaves sort of continuing spiraling all the way up as a continuity. Here's the piece on the left, which is one of the top pieces on the column, and then as you're moving, the Piranesi prints. So there they are, all moving, showing you these are the proofs that the lenticular printers that we work with would be sending us.
And these are part of a project we're about to install possibly next month in LA, in a metro station between Compton and Watts. This large 12-foot by 14-foot parasols, water jet cut.
So this is being Compton and Watts. It is the Rosa Parks station. You can maybe make her out on the parasol that's behind. We used her mugshot for when she got processed as part of the station. There's the Black Power fist on the parasol in front of us. And then the other parasol, there's 3 models, also has the Black Panthers in them. We are talking about Compton and Watts, and we very much wanted to talk about history and some of the things that have happened there in terms of the Watts riots and so on. And of course, nowadays those communities are turning into Latin American communities as well. So there's an interesting mix happening in terms of the demographics. Those holes that you see in the parasol are going to have polished glass diamonds in them. So you will see the light not only projecting through the screens and making the patterns on the ground, but they will also hit those diamonds and refract as viewers are looking at them from underneath. Give you a scale, this is one of the 14-footers. There is 2 14-footers, and that is 14 feet wide and 14 feet tall. This gives you a little idea of we were testing the LED lights in them, and there's going to be 4 12-footers, 12 feet high, 12 feet wide. So there's 6 of them. And here's a little rendition of them next to that would be the 105 freeway above that goes to Inglewood, to the airport. So it's a station that crosses 2 different lines, an exchange station, the green and the blue line in LA. You can kind of make out Rosa Parks there on the blue canopy. And so that brings us to an end. The rocket that you see there is a project we're working on right now for the city of Sacramento, California, the capital. And it's going to be a 30 plus foot tall rocket taking off, and water jet cut flowers being projected onto the walls of the convention center from on the street corner. There's a couple of our galleries, our website, our galleries, and our next projects are, we were very, very lucky to be the first exhibition ever for the Smithsonian Latino Center. That will be opening later this year.
Next year.
If not delayed into early next year. And that will be at the brand new Cheech Marin Museum in Riverside. That will be so we'll be inaugurating for both institutions, and that will travel with the catalog to other museums. And we might be part of the European the ECC pavilion
during the Venice Biennale. Yeah.
It's quite possible. And also our exhibition is going to be going to the Glass Museum in Portugal, Marina Grande, October of next year as well. With that, I think we are ready to take questions. I will be getting rid of screen sharing.
Great.
And I did put those links in the chat box for anybody that would like them.
Great. Thanks so much for talking to us about your work. Always fascinating to hear what you guys are up to. We do have some questions already coming in from the audience. So you had mentioned your father was an architect, and clearly both of you are artists. So do you come from a family of artists?
Yes, actually, my grandmother was actually one of the first women to attend CCAC in Berkeley, in Oakland.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
And even within our family, we're the two youngest of six. Our oldest brother is an architect, and the next one down is a painter. The next one down is a designer, and our sister is interior designer. So we have a little bit of that in our family, I guess.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's excellent. Let's see. We also, again, all the comments of people have been very delighted to see your work, and we're curious about the design process. How do you start to imagine and think about pieces, and then take it to that design and the fabrication phase, and then get to the final result? Kind of the roles of materials, ways of production, scale, since you guys have such.
You mean for public art?
Any of your art.
And well, it's you're talking about the collaboration process. We've been doing it for so long that now it's basically an ongoing conversation. We really hardly ever stumble into blocks about how to proceed. I think we have complementary personalities, complementary abilities, but we're both very interested in similar things. That's why it works.
But for blown glass, for instance, we would start with a drawing, and maybe one of us starts and the other one says, "What if we do this?" And it's sort of, as we get excited about an idea, we ferret that out enough to actually start. We do a bit of shooting from the hip, and especially when you're invited to different shops that may have different equipment, different glass, all of those things affect you. But especially different people. I mean, we may be working with beginners from a university at one point, or we may be looking at, working with a very, very advanced people who do different things, of course, and sort of we have to plan those things as well. Working on public art is different in the sense that it's an RFQ, meaning there's the request for qualifications that a city sends out or an entity, and then they would, you would have to see if that's something that would work, that applies to it, and then we make an effort if it's something that excites us. But in that sense, we do have more divided roles in that he's very much an engineer and does a lot of the hands-on sculpting, like when he does clay models for digitalizing, and then we're casting them in bronze or something. I do a lot of the graphic work on Photoshop, but that does not mean that that's my work or that's his work, because we always do work with each other's feedback and input, because it's because it's a collaboration. It wouldn't be otherwise.
Great. Do you ever, any of those, you mentioned sort of sketching stuff out. Do you ever, like keep those preparatory drawings or have them on display with the work that ends up in galleries or museums, or is that just sort of scrap that goes along?
We're trying, like, for instance, all our blown glass work is tied to at least one or two sketches. And we're trying to link them together to keep them together, but we're not the most organized people in the world. So
yeah, we're trying to do that. The good news is that the Smithsonian, part of what we're doing with the Smithsonian, they also got the museum, the Smithsonian Museum of American Art they reached out to us and want to take our archive, which of course means it's a great way to have somebody organize all of those things, because at some point, we would love to. In fact, we thought about keeping it a piece, the drawing with the piece, and in some cases even say, look, you also have this drawing as a kind of a part of the provenance of the work. But we haven't made a habit of doing that, but we're starting to look into that.
Nice. Yeah, it's really exciting that your archives are going to be saved at the Smithsonian for future artists to be inspired by all the amazing work you guys have done. I just say that as a museum person. Someone asked about, and speaking of materiality, I know someone had asked previously when they registered about, you do a lot of multimedia work and incorporate found objects, or purposefully found objects, as you might say. Does any sort of that materiality of those objects, present problems as you're working, or, sort of put you in a box in any way?
Two different questions, but yes, of course, we over the years we've learned to use materials that best work with our a good example, I think, for that is when we've used like plastics and everyday stuff next to glass. We're obviously taking preciousness away from glass, which, by the way, isn't precious. It's people are throwing glass away every day. The bottles, it's not intrinsically value. It's a value you put by adding your work to it that matters. I think we can all agree with that. And of course, some people that really value it may think of us as sort of denoting the lack of value to glass, and it's not the case. We're not saying that glass is better than or worse than, because we're not about judgment on this. What we have done, though, is we used this epoxy coating on all the other materials, and sometimes on the glass itself, depending, and that has unified all the mixed media because it makes it all shiny like it's wet and more like the glass itself. And since we started using that material as a great unifier, it has changed our work in a good way. I think it's almost as if though before your eyes would glide across the glass and then screech to a halt on a different surface, because it's matte, because it lacks the luster. And now that everything is shiny, even though there are all these, it just sort of makes the eye move around and flow a lot easier. Made a big difference, I think. And you can literally see the older work before that, and then when we started to do that. And I think that the work has more cohesion after that because it all flows better visually. As far as what was the second part of the question? Is there was a longevity and there was another part.
We'll just have the different materiality of all these different found objects. Do they sort of put any constraints on the work?
When we do workshops, we run at length with various ways to attach different materials together, and you have to have a strategy. Some materials don't attach well to other materials, or they just simply pose structural difficulties. So you have to have a strategy how to put it all together. And besides that strategy of how to mechanically put things together, it has to go together visually. And that's what I never say, that this stuff that we lovingly call goop, because it goops everything up in this very shiny coloring. It really gives things unity. And I think that's the biggest problem with mixed media, is how do you give a piece unity? How do you make it not look like a bunch of shit just stuck with it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some people think that way, like you just put things together, and not everybody made it. Not we know our work isn't for everybody, but it takes a lot of work for us to put. Sometimes we add too much, and then we start subtracting so that we get to the right balance of things. And we're very aware. We did go to school, so we're very aware of what the eye is doing, what the focal point is doing, all of these things, contrasts, all of these things that you're using to make your case in terms of design. I mean, all of that stuff is at play when we're making these things. So, and yeah, longevity is important, but giving it a coat of this epoxy also gives it an added UV protection, because after all, now that material is that much more protected. Still, you don't necessarily want direct sunlight on it, but almost all materials in the artist, other than glass or ceramic that's been cooked, it can't take direct sunlight. Photography has to be in a dark room, for goodness sake, anyway.
Yeah.
Mixed media.
So switching back to more focused on a specific material with glass, someone had asked about, you had mentioned working with I think it was the leaded glass. You found more difficult than, I guess, you were working with soda lime glass before. So you want to talk a little bit about that discovery? And
it was fascinating. We simply had no experience working with the lead glass. And the lead glass stays hot for so long that even if you touch it again minutes afterwards, because we're used to soda lime glass developing this skin almost instantly, but the lead glass won't. And
Yeah,
if
it
you
retains.
touch it with any tool, you'll mark it.
And it stays hot a lot. It's a lot longer than soda lime. It's also heavier, mushier. But I mean, nothing you. I mean, we're itinerant glass blowers. You know, we're blowing glass wherever we can, and we learned that things are very different in different places, from very stiff glass to very soft glass. So it's just another small learning curve, but a lot of fun and very different experience.
Yeah. So speaking of different places, again, as we looked through, as you reviewed all your work and also where it's being displayed, you really touch on a lot of cultural aspects. And it seems to almost want to unite cultures. Is that an important part of what your work is trying to say?
Absolutely. I think, when Einar first did his genome, or where his blood is from, of course, he's a Euromot and has a blood from a lot of places and some surprising places, and even the Americas. And it is, you're right, it is about how we're all united, we're not divided, and especially these times of stupid tribalism, it's good to mention that historically we're all so connected. We're not so separated. And I think even in a more natural way, we're connected to the natural world, even though we have made our Western thesis to try to deny it. We're completely connected, and now we're feeling the pain of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned you incorporated, images from different indigenous cultures in Mexico, such as the Aztecs. Can you give examples of others you might have explored in your work, maybe Maya or Miztecs?
Well, mostly Mesoamerican, Mexican imagery.
Well, it's funny because appropriation, I guess we need to talk about appropriation as a good moment. Appropriation is always a problematic. If you grab onto culture, somebody else's culture, and use it willy-nilly, you could be called for appropriation. But after all, art has done that for its entire existence. So that whole idea of, hey, you copied that, you're like, well, everybody has up to now. And let's face it, artists don't come from a vacuum. We're all affected by millions of influences. But there is such a thing as insensitive cultural appropriation. And then there is hopefully sensitive, or at least somewhat researched, understood. So when we travel somewhere and research, like the Wodiano up in Poland, which is also kind of a Baltic thing, we do a little research, but we do not pretend to know it or anything. It is superficial to go and learn a little bit and try to talk about it. But we're only here for a little while as human beings. We are here superficially, and we need to be humble about those things too. So if anybody called us out for using something very inappropriately, we would have to see what they mean by that and then respond and indeed even retract something. And because if it's not done right with sensitivity, it's not right. But we also can't be so culturally sensitive that we don't allow new versions of things to happen. I mean, the whole thing with humanity has been the way it has evolved and grown into millions of new subcultures all the time. Language is morphing. So, there's a balance there somewhere. And of course, artists, if we were worried about appropriation willy-nilly, we wouldn't even move, because you could technically say that everything's been done already and all you're doing is rehashing it. And then, well, that's a great buzzkill right there.
Well, there's nothing more boring than simple copy. And I think as an artist, we carry the responsibility when you take something is to make it your own. Somehow that it has to be interpreted into your own present context. You're not just copying. Somehow it has to mean something in your present context.
Yeah, so if we try to make something that's based on the Aztecs, if we copy it, well, the Aztecs already did that. We don't need to do that. And I'm sure they did it better anyway, because that's who they are. Well, what we can do is say, well, look at this imagery from this time frame, from this place, and how we can morph it and change meaning and alter it, and it reshuffled the deck of cards, and because there's new meanings, and those new meanings are what makes newness new. Otherwise, everything is old. Everything comes from somewhere. And to say that your artwork comes from no, in fact, that's one of our biggest defense for collaboration, is that we're all really collaborating anyway, because the art teacher that sparked your interest, or one of your parents or your uncle or an art museum, you're always standing on the shoulders of greats. The idea that you come from it alone and it's your vision is kind of silly, and what a burden.
Yeah, and I think you guys were fellows at Wheaton. Was it in 2004 or 2005?
Something like that.
2 decades ago.
Yeah, almost.
Yes. I know you very kindly donated a couple pieces to the museum, and I know one that's on display right now was you had, again, coming down to South Jersey, had kind of reviewed that down Jersey, some of the folklore behind the Jersey Devil, and that came out, in your pieces. So I know your time at Wheaton definitely reflects what you've been.
That has to be our most intense engagement with high glass ever, because we both got the fellowship at the same time, so
separately.
So we did a lot of high glass.
Seven annealers, with our name on them, nobody else. So it affected our careers very much, because we're doing public art. Starting in public art then. We completely made the glass elements for it in Sandcast for a public art project we did in San Diego for Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, and just blown glass in front of people viewing. And it was a lot of work. It affected us very much. Like Kamik said, I think we both got a little bit of carpal because it was repetitive stress. We were pole turning and ladle turning, and so blowing glass in the day, ladling at night, and completely exhausted every day. It was definitely career-changing experience.
Very lucky. What a blast. We're very, very lucky to have done that.
If we ever go back, I don't think we're going to have the same rhythm. Maybe slow it down a little bit.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah. Well, we were so grateful that you were able to come out, and we do hope we get to see you again with this. We get to travel again. Yes. So it mentions that you came from a family of artists and architects and designers. So are there any younger generations of the De La Torres out there who are continuing in your footsteps or getting involved in any other areas of art?
His son Nadir is 10 years old, and I believe is a creative, definitely. I would be surprised if he doesn't have a creative career in his future. And yes, we have a couple of other nephews and nieces that are one way or other related to the arts, but mostly unrelated. Only a couple of them. But yeah, apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as it were.
Nice. Well, that's great. Great to hear more from the De La Torres. That's wonderful. Don't appear to have any other questions from the audience at this moment. Was there anything else you wanted to mention to us, or I'll have the last call out there for questions?
Shout out to Devira. I know I just saw that she was there earlier. Good to see her on there, and Susan also from Wheaton as well. And thank you for having us. We're thrilled to share what we're up to.
Yeah, we're thrilled that you're able to join us. Well, I guess for you it might be the afternoon. For us out here in New Jersey, it's the evening. And so exciting to see all the wonderful stuff you're working on, and all over the world. That's really, really fantastic. And again, plug for the museums out there. I'm really, really thrilled that you're getting involved, getting your archives out there so that we can preserve them for perpetuity, so that 100 years from now, people can be inspired by what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we were thrilled that it won't be going to a dumpster when we're gone.
Thank you everybody for participating.
Yes, yeah, everybody who showed up, we really appreciate it.
We do. I don't know if we did have a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to look at them, Kristen. They were a little bit further up, but in the meantime, I'll just ask, because we touched on it before, but you mentioned that there was the slide with the Tara icon with the graffiti on it, and that was a touching story. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that briefly.
Tara, we have a Tara here, and then where we are now is in the wine region in Mexico, the sort of Mexican Napa Valley. It's the Pacific Northwest of Mexico, of course. And in the closest city nearby, it's called Ensenada. It's about 20 minutes away from here, port town. In 1993, some Buddhist monks came and offered to erect a Buddhist sculpture in the name of peace and love and fraternity and humanity and all these things. And so the city said, sure, why don't you put it on that hill over there next to a water storage tank up on a hill. And so they built this like 2-story tall Tara, which is a feminine deity from the Buddhist pantheon. You usually only see Buddha. What's interesting about Buddhism is that it's not like there's all these saints or anything, but so there's this Tara, and over the years, the teenagers would go up there and get high and make out, and of course they also graffitied her. But we love the way that she maintained this grace about her, even defaced. She was still standing, sitting very gracefully. And so we shot some images of her over the years and have used quite a bit, her image quite a bit in our work, because we love the way that this Buddhism is so, seems to be so non-threatening to other religions, mostly. And in that piece, in that particular piece, it switches from, that piece called Feminencia, sort of the eminence of femininity. So it has the Leopold from Belgium, surrounded by women looking very nervous, because is nervous that women are becoming powerful. So it's sort of the end of the patriarch is what we're talking about there, or in the eminence of the power of femininity. Again, a reverence to femininity from our end, if you will.
It's interesting how that image for us has struck a nerve, and we have used it for a while. Ironically, that sculpture has been restored since it was vandalized. And it doesn't quite have the same power. They covered her up, so
they put a tube top, and so she's not topless anymore. Which of course is kind of funny to take a deity from a different culture and then dress her in your own culture. So I think we're going to have to do something with a new image, because it's the absurdity it does not escape us. But yeah,
thank you for that. Kristen, was that everybody?
Yeah, I think we've got all of the questions.
Okay, well, I did share a lot of links in the chat, and I'm just one more time going to share the Torre Brothers.art so that you can visit Einar and Hamix and their work. It's a beautiful website. And I want to thank you both again from myself and Kristen and WheatonArts, and thank you for working with us. And we always appreciate the time that the artists spend with us. And I want to share Kristen's information as well. So if you'd like to reach out to Kristen and have any ideas for future programming, we'd always love to hear from you. You can actually download the chat. There's 3 little buttons off to the side. If you click on that, you can download the chat. If you don't get a chance to do that, you can reach me at mpeterson@wheatonarts.org. And have a lovely evening, everyone. And again, thank you so much for being with us here. Good night.
Do visit the museum. and
Yes.
visit the Wheaton.
Thank
It's
you
beautiful,
both.
wonderful experience, not to be missed.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.